네, 감사합니다.
Thank you, and without further ado, we will commence the session 4 under the theme of current status and development plans of public tech-based startups ecosystem. And they have a photo session. Then after they finish their photo session, we would like to kick off the session 4. So we will kick off the main session 4 in earnest. So why don't you hurry? And I would like to introduce you to the session 4's moderator. And CEO Seung is from Seoul Techno Holdings. And let me introduce to you our panelist and Director Ji-Hoon Lee from Korea Association of Tech Holdings. So why don't you come up to the stage? Please give him a big round of applause while he makes his way onto the stage. And please give them a big round of applause once again. Can we start? Good afternoon. As introduced, I am E.G. Hoon, Director of Korea Association of Tech Holdings. I am asked to talk about the current status and development plans of public tech-based startup ecosystem. So actually, public tech-based startup ecosystem has investors and companies, and there are many stakeholders in this system. I mainly talk about the supplier's perspective. And there are four content. So the current status and the changes in governance and the proposals to ecosystems development. So the public technology commercialization. Actually, you might not be aware because you are in private sector. So let me brief you on what public technology commercialization is. Universities are carrying out projects for technological commercialization. You might be wondering why universities get involved. So actually, universities have win a lot of orders from R&D project. 21 trillion won worth of R&D budget was supported, and of which 9 trillion won was won by university, and 6 trillion won was by private sector, and rest of them was for private sector. So R&D budget is big, and outcomes of the R&D are articles and patent applications, and articles and papers have limitations in providing profits, but patents are able to serve as an asset for private sector to increase their asset. So management of outcomes means the expansion. So previously, public institutes have indirect impact on the public technological commercialization. That was the past history of the past. So they do start their own business, and they create this model to support the private sector's growth. And nowadays, the government is now responsible the secondary and primary outcomes, and they are responsible for managing this kind of outcomes. As I mentioned before, the technological transfer were the cases in a direct manner, but now these cases become more direct rather than indirect. So public research institutes, universities, and government-funded institutions are at the center stage. And the public institutes start their businesses. And let me talk about the entities and players. And for your better understanding, I insert this image. There is a startup by player and by a university, or by a private sector entity with their public technology. And technology startups or research institute startups are made by players And one of the issues here is that the startups by organization, but actually the inventors jump into the ecosystem with their idea, but there is a bolder activities. So for expansion of the public research institutes, the organization's patent, actually this is a inventorship and career inventorship. So these kind of cases are applied to the startup as a public research, and government funded agencies are sharing the same stories. Actually, without a student, then everything is similar. And previously, the influence were indirect. Of course, they reaped outcomes and benefit, but there are also limitations on technological transfer. So actually, they are continuously transfer technology, but consistency is of issue here, and also supporting commercialization and the scale of the supporting organizations stay stagnant at some point. As you can see from this table, there is a continuous growth trend, but the growing trend remains plateau. That's why public funded research institutes and governments realize the commercialization of technology with technology transfer, and this becomes matured, so they try to pay much attention to revitalization of startup by putting universities at its center. And like startups from universities, rather than universities, research institutes also have less attention to startup. Many universities provide spin-off startups by technology holdings, but the government-funded research institutes are more active, and the same goes to management of outcomes like universities. This enjoys continuous growth trend, but the trend remains plateau. On that note, technological commercialization should undergo changes in governance. Actually, the growth trend remains stagnant, so we need to pay much attention to improving efficiency of technological commercialization at a public organizational level. In overseas universities have modeled a lot when it comes to technological holdings, and also they previously influenced in an indirect manner, but they try to pay much attention to the bigger role of universities in in startup ecosystem. So this should require changes in governance, but there's differences compared to the US and to Korea. But actually, in the US, they should be a independent legal entity. So in the universities, there is a investment, technological holdings, and the other entities, and also asset management entities. So this kind of legal entities should be established in the US. Likewise, the UK and the Sweden, the models are similar. And so this is about the modeling of universities as a startup, and this is a modeling for research institutes. And in Sweden, they try to commercialize technologies, but at the same time, they need to understand the necessity of funding scale. So technological holdings, and like this, they do have a job as an accelerator for funding, and also this is in line with VC. So the pioneering universities and research institute in pioneering in advanced countries, they try to do technological transfer as its basis and as an indirect manner, but at the same time, universities and government-funded research agencies are active in building their own startups in a direct manner. So actually, there is a dedicated department for technology transfer in universities, but there is a limitation as an NGO. So as a bold model, they establish a holdings as a legal entity, and they are only responsible for investment. But at the same time, this is where limitations come into being. So to effectively run these technology holdings, universities limitations should be improved when they indirectly involve in the startup ecosystem. So TLO and TTO is well linked.
통합해서 운영하는 효과 중에 한
One of the effects of this integration is that college university is a public corporation, but it has some limitation in expanding its scope of projects or scope of business. But since holdings company and this integration forum is a private player, so the expansion beyond the middle stage is a little bit easier compared to universities. And you can register as a tips operator and accelerator in the process, so that's a lot easier too. And I mentioned the supply side, and in order to revitalize the ecosystem in this public technology, but so far we are seeing some results of the university technology projects. But I think there are two directions. The first one is technology, and the second perspective is commercialization. So is this technology already available in the private market? So is it and is it commercializable? A lot of technologies owned by universities are a little bit different than what private sectors want. And the reason behind that is that you tend to be safer. You don't want to fail. And most of the technologies wanted by private sectors have a lot of risks, but you don't want to do that. You don't want to embrace those risks. So you want to go safe. So instead of high risk, high yield, you want to go for middle risk or low risk, low yield. So that's the basic direction or some issues in the university technology projects. But to be more competitive, you have to be more welcoming or more embracing towards these risks. And that is the direction of improvement. So this is an area where the role of the government should jump in instead of public institution. So public universities, public institutions should focus more on the commercialization. If you look at the capacity of any university or public corporation, what a private company can do is related to facilities and equipment, because these facilities and equipment owned by a public university and public institutions are something that can never be enjoyed by private companies. But if you look at some universities, the equipment and facilities are really good. It's a really conducive environment for R&D efforts. So if you utilize these facilities and equipment capabilities, it's going to be really helpful in developing and advancing technologies. So in that sense, university and public corporations can play its role. And another thing is that the startup infrastructure in Korea are rather fragmented with low efficiency. So value chain linking this business model should be in a direction for further collaboration and further integration instead of fragmentation. So that is a role a public corporation, a public entity, or university should play in terms of helping startups prosper. So currently, in short-term perspective, our focus should be efficiency, linking these facilities, matching these facilities and the needs. And longer term, we have to look at institutional improvement and supporting policies. So I think this approach is more realistic. So in that sense, so for bigger efficiency of the project, well, you talk about awareness raise or institutional improvement and modeling and also governance that can facilitate this technological transfer and the consultancy service for a startup. So this governance improvement and streamlining is more realistic approach. And for government funded or state funded institution, in terms of expansion of the scope of business, they do have some limitation. So maybe they can have a separate scheme for running this project. And also the expansion of the TLO and forming funds for research institutes, what they can think of establishing a separate entity, separate for-profit entity that can be operated independent from university or public corporation. And this slide will be of further interest during the Q&A session, I think. So this wraps up my presentation due to time constraints. I ran out all of my time, so I made my presentation as brief as possible. But if you have any question, I welcome all of your questions. Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. So we will delve right into the panel discussion session. So do not leave the stage. So I'd like to invite you back to the stage for the panel discussion, and I'd like to invite President Mok Seung-ha as a moderator, and I'd like to invite also the panelists for this session. Please welcome our panelists and moderator with a warm round of applause. Yes, thank you, Mr. Mok Seung-hwan, the moderator for this session, and the stage is yours. Thank you for the introduction. I am Professor Mok Seung-hwan from Seoul Techno Holdings. And it's my honor to moderate this session. And I really enjoyed the presentation about public technology and project. So I think that should be a theme for our discussion. Part of the theme is our discussion. So economic situation is not really favorable. But I think this Fly Asia 2022 will be of great help to revitalize the startup discussions. And I'm already seeing some positive signs for further development. And how about we start the session with the self-introduction? Hello, I am Kim Seong-geun from Busan National University Technology. Holdings. Yes, and our presenter. Yes, thank you. I am Hoon, Korea Association of Technology Holdings. Hi, I am Chang from MU Tech Holdings. Hi, Kim Pangan from Mirae Holdings Company. Yes, thank you for your presence. It's so nice to see you here in Busan. And my question to all of you is the current environment is not really favorable for investment, especially in startups. So what is your opinion about future prospect, both short term and long term? So we'd like to talk a little bit of macro discussions and then delve into public technology, which is our specific term. So starting from you. So
So we are investor at the same time. We seek out for an investment as well. So when we meet with VC, they said this is not the right timing. Please wait and stay. And after the next year's spring, there might be a good movement. But as a seed investor, as a facilitator, I think this is a golden opportunity because at a seed level, the amount of investment is not that big. And also, with a small amount of investment, startups can grow. But over the long term, we need to delay responses. At the same time, we need to seek out survival strategies. So some people say that this ice age will stay longer than 2 years. The same goes as evidenced by Asian financial crisis. So I hope that after the summer next year, the market will be normalized. Our subsidiaries and our investment subjects are recommended to decrease their expenditure and they need to seek out long-term strategy to stay afloat. And is there anything to add on, CEO Mo? Sorry, but
그
what would
해서
what would be the point?
될 것 같은지.
예?
스타트업 투자 시장. 우리
So what about the startup investment market?
그러니까 단기적으로 지금 상황이 되게 어려운데 향후에 좀 어떻게 예측이
So actually, over the short term, the situations are not that favorable. But what about the long term? So actually, I paid many visits to public organizations and universities, but started in the early stage find it difficult. But I belong to the association, so we provide and offer recommendations to the government at the same time cooperative model. This is what we are mostly required and requested. But one thing that I found regrettable is that private startups and startups within public organizations coming out into the ecosystem have differences. Those in the private sector are desperate, so they do a lot of activities to attract investment and meet institutional investors. So those out of public sector should follow suit as private sector startups have done. So those from public organizations are beneficiaries of government grants and supportive projects. These are the most cases. And they start their own businesses with their existing technology, so they are not that bold in attracting investment. So actually, the institutional investment is convinced to pay much attention to their technology. So the willingness that the private sector has should be on a point to attract more investment. So public So startups growing out of this public organization should follow the suit. And this is prerequisite to revitalize the startup ecosystem.
팀장님 말씀해 주시죠.
And could you please share your ideas? Team manager Lee? I found out an online article. Startup Trend Report was released in this year September. Venture capital officials and the to-be startups and the founders of startups. And actually, the article was about the survey. And the mood for this year's investment is 50 out of 100 scale. Last year was 70 out of 100 scale. That means there is a cooling down trend in investment passion. But many people think that next year we can draw a rosy picture for investment. In particular, those in the venture capitals area, this year's will be a tough year, and they try to decrease their investment, and up to 3 years this trend will be continuous. So this article said so. And building on the data and articles that I read, early this year, actually 10 billion won series funding went to the subsidiaries. They are already secure budgets for operations and research and development, but the foundation said that next year there might be a ice age for investment, and this year can be likened to harsh winter, but next year will be an ice age for investment. So they need to downsize their staff member to 60 out of 80. So this is a clear testament to the difficulties that the domestic startup investment ecosystem has gone through. Thank you very much, and see you. And actually, we do have plenty of time. So the startup investment ecosystems are well aligned with global economy. And also the stock market is one of the great influence in this ecosystem. So the growth of stock ecosystem is a prerequisite for many companies to go public, and it is difficult for those companies to attract Series A, B, C funding if the stock market is not able to grow. And there is a shadow over the investment market, and we are expected to grow at a 2.3%, but this was revised down to 1 point something percent. And in the earlier next year, the global economy will buttress, but in the later year, the global economy will be in a darker picture, and the superpowers conflict and the Ukrainian war with Russia has wreaked havoc on prices of raw materials and of agricultural products. But at the same time, there is an example that enjoys growth, and also there are industries that grow as well in times of crisis. Biotech or electric devices witness a drop in stock price, but entertainment industry witness an increase in their stock price. And also at the same time, after the COVID-19 fall under the control, travel related industry and science related industries are also enjoying robust position. And 986 trillion won was invested last year, but this is quarterly basis. And Q3 and Q4, 986 trillion was investment last year, and Q4 this year 720 trillion won was invested. And of course, last year's Q3 and Q4, 2.1 trillion won was investment, and this year's Q3 and Q4, 1.2 trillion won was invested. And actually, there is a divided statistics for Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 this year, but there is a total statistic for Q1 2021. So these all statistics indicate that we are in a green picture, and funding that was formulated by VCs are only increasing in 2021, Q3, Q4, and Q1 to Q3. What 5.4 trillion won was funded, but this year 7 trillion was funded. So this means there is a growing number of investment amount driven by government. Actually, this should be earmarked this year, and Series A, and so this kind of budget and investment are well consumed at Series A. So those companies who go through Series A will face difficulty in next year, but those companies before Series A are finding much easier for them to attract Series A funding next year. So actually they need to expand their runway. And so this year should be that year as well.
좀 객관적으로 말씀.
Yes, you put this into perspective by some numbers, actual numbers. So the investment will not be good, but if you look at blind fund, next year is gonna be a seed stage. So there's gonna be some investment going on next year. So speaking of which, the investment environment is not good, but there are still a lot of investments going on. So what is it that you're doing in terms of investment? Can you start from? So do you hear? You don't hear. You don't hear me there. So what are you doing for your investment activities? So can you start from here? Yes, at Mirae Holdings, we of course make an investment into tech companies, but we stay away from one-off investment thing. So for example, we make a seed investment and we try to follow up those companies in the next couple of series. So we have this funneling approach. We started big and we try to narrow down a little bit. So we try to be more responsible for our choice. And secondly, one of the things that we are doing wrong in Korea generally, so people tend to think that unicorns can never be born out of public technology frame because the market is small and this market is structured favorable to as favorable to large companies. And of course, this has some grain of truth. And in the Ministry of Science built this fintech scheme, and that's how he made it to the minister. And when he was doing the negotiation for for a certain fintech technology with Samsung, and there's this issue regarding the patent, and this court ordered Samsung to pay 1.2 trillion as a fine. So there's this strong barrier in terms of the patent, and if we keep doing this, it's really hard for our company to become a really tech-strong company. So this has to start from public institutions. So there could be a second market Curly and second unicorn company, but most importantly, we have to identify and support tech-based companies. And that's what we do right now. And our company is essentially an investor. So turnout is really important. the ROI is really important. That's our core interest. So whatever our scenario was, at the end of the day, it's the return that matters the most. So a lot of universities are jumping into these areas, but I'm not sure whether that's the right direction. So they don't think about their ultimate objective. No one thinks about the ultimate results of this. So creating a small fund and putting in 1 billion and a 2 billion one of investment, that's not the right direction. Yes, you mentioned fundamental principles about investment. So you are. Can you talk a little bit about the investment projects going on in the Busan National University? And you, President, mentioned the public investment right now. So please elaborate on that. Yes, at Busan National University, we always try to true to our original purpose. So there should be technology developed by university, Busan University, and the CEO and management level should come from Busan University professors. So the principle is that in order for us to go to the market, we always stick to our principles. So we don't, even though we don't have many projects, but I think we're doing quite well, and we are running 4 cooperatives right now. And this cooperative should preferably use the space, researchers, equipment, facilities, and for clinical projects, hospitals. Since we have a hospital, so we always consider these items, consider the standards when selecting projects and companies. And what's more important than making investment is cooperating and giving support. And a lot of companies in the early stage of the project development, they don't know much. So when trying to find potential investment targets, we always try to screen the companies that have a right business mind. And of course, we do know that it takes at least about 3 years for them to fully develop their potential. And public technology requires at least 3 years to mature. So this 3 years is the time for any technology to fully mature within any set of hardware, software. So I think we're doing well using whatever we have as a resource.
지주회사
And actually, I'm responsible for Association for Technology Holdings, but actually, I have spent 5 years in technology transfer at university level, and also I have been engaged in a variety of roles, but I am responsible for technology holdings. But I don't think that every public organization has their own technology holdings. But there might be a macro and micro perspective. So at a micro perspective, holdings can function as an investment or VC. So if there is a model that has less potential for profit, then there is no necessity to build such entity. But at a macro level, the government supports and the demands from universities are well accepted in certain framework and platform. At the time, we can create a technology holdings. So we need to think about the feedback on the ground and their difficulties on the ground and the government key direction and the local government, the local university and the Seoul metropolitan universities. And there are a web of there is a different web of conflicting interest. So actually, I recommend those kind of situations. I recommend you if you are under this kind of situations, not to start or build a technology holdings, because there is some cases where you need to be active at government's policy supports. And of course, the government policy projects can offset the shortage of the university's lack of budget. So, if you are forced to build their holdings, even though you don't have profitable model, so you need to take into considerations all the perspective. Universities and public institutes are not enough to compete with private sector. Those areas are not that areas of expertise, but the VCs have their infrastructure and the personnel and IP that the public organization or public sector will have a much potential to be successful. But without such infrastructure and capabilities, then you need to map out customized operation model. In particular, in case universities with a smaller size, then the academia and the industry and the universities form a consortium. Then this can be evolved into a holdings model. And our holdings model, when we come, many people mistake our model as a Chinese model. So in Korea, the holdings model is introduced to manage those kind of personnel. And so the pure holding model should be understood, but at the same time, holding should be responsible for VC function. But I don't think that this is desirable when every university is forced to establish a technology holding. And if a university directly jumps into a startups, rather than this, they need to nurture a map out model to nurture talents over the long haul. And technology holdings are everywhere, I think. So there are a garden variety of technology holdings with differences. Then actually there might be a complication coming into being. So could you please introduce and for you? And actually I want to throw a question to your organization. Technological holdings and those who made an investment in public sector. How can public sector be equipped with competitiveness compared to private sector? So and for you, technology holdings is funded by Aj University. It was established in July 2016, and we are a metropolitan alliance technology holdings with 7 universities at a Seoul metropolitan area. So a total of 8 universities are joining our membership. And this is the one and only technology holdings that did not include local governments. We are only comprised of universities, and we don't have self-fund, and we are small technology holdings. We are the poster child. As CEO Kim once mentioned, we are not afford using our capital and be bold in investing in public sector. We might experience losses, but the duration is inevitably longer. And also, we don't have fund that can be used in Series A VC. So initial investment is our seed money. So we are doing our roles somewhat different to typical type of VCs. It takes a longer for us to make an investment. And also our ROI is smaller compared to larger scale technological holdings. But in 2019, we actually did exit at a higher valuation. And we are able to utilize our surplus to establish subsidiaries. And also we do reinvestment. This is how we operate. So unlike the nature of VC in private sector, we focus on what universities are good at. As a speaker mentioned, there are good infrastructure that universities have. So we try to utilize this infrastructure to attract investment from other sectors. So actually, you can consider university infrastructure as an asset, a capital attraction source, and we are asked to provide accreditation and licensing guidelines from MFDS for medications. So actually, there is a blurred distinction between medical device under the Medical Device Act and the medications under the Pharmacy Act. So there is no clear guideline. Without these guidelines, then even though the startups have received a larger amount of investment, their products might be falling under the category of medical device, but their licensing is falling under the category of medication, then this requires a lot of money. It costs a lot. So actually so our efforts to prevent those startups from experiencing these bad cases. And when they do their commercialization of technology, we need to map out licensing guidelines with much clarity so that we can accelerate the development of products, thereby advancing into the market at a faster pace. And with Aju University's Technology Holdings and M4U Technology Holdings are forming a symposium, a consortium. We are involved in CRO companies, in licensing. So we also do have a consulting company which supports entire life cycle. And when those companies come to university, then the consulting center comes into play, and they try to help them to apply for a patent, and they help those patents to be transferred in a proper manner, and animal test or through GMP facilities. They do produce food, and they help those companies to produce food in accordance with GMP under their facilities. And this is what we help with companies. And if you think you are a good company with a great potential, then please reach out to universities, and 2 to 3 years, 2 to 3 weeks of feasibility test and identification of business model is carried out, and then we finalize the outcomes. Actually, we are not able to make a huge investment, but with our good R&D infrastructure, we can input this infrastructure into the company, and then the companies can be helped by us to attract a larger amount of investment with a fertile ground for investment. And actually, you have a lot on your plate.
를 잡으실 수 있을 것 같아요.
I think you are gonna go into one of good examples because if you are ready to utilize some uniquely excellent perspective only universities can have, I think that's gonna be a unique selling point. So I'd like to direct my question to the president of Mirae Holdings, who is in active cooperation with private players. So what could be some strengths of public institutions, of public organizations? A Mirae Holdings company was established by Science and Technology Research Institute, and we're not a tech holdings, technically speaking, so we are free from some regulations, unlike other public institutions. And so we are under the monitoring of Ministry of Science and ICT, not under the Ministry of Education. So what I'm saying is that public investment shouldn't be something that can compensate for the private investment. Public institutions, public investment should not work as a prohibitive force against the private investment. And the public investment should focus more on the public technology. So during an era where the UK was occupying India, they first came to the India and they found a lot of cobras in India. So they had this project where they pay people when they catch a cobra. So cobra became almost extinct. But at one point, cobra grew exponentially in numbers, and it turns out a lot of people started to keep cobras as a source of income in their house, because if you cut the tail of a cobra and bring it to the government as a proof that you catch this cobra. So I think the point here is that number isn't everything. The stats aren't everything. People tend to think that government will look at the numbers, well, the KPIs, but that's not true. So there's an SME and there's an innovative company. So is a normal SME a bad company and an innovative company a good company? No, I don't think that's a ridiculous differentiation. Well, SME requires money to grow itself. Look at Samsung, how it grew from a small company to a global large company. So, for example, if you look at a university in Daejeon, every year there are 50, 60, 70 even startups every year. And there's no way for us to find a new startup that is not like a fried chicken parlor. Because all of the ideas look similar, and none of them innovative. So the point is, it's not about numbers. 50, 60, 70, it doesn't matter. One good, innovative company is important. Look at Sarah Park, a golfer. You follow suit after a one big influencer. We have this Sarah Park kid generation. So what's important is that we have to look upon the past history. Have we ever nurtured any good global company that can be tantamount, that can be paramount to one big global American company, as we all know? Yes, right. You talked about Sarah Park, and we also talked about Yeona Kim and BTS. So we need just one good breakthrough, innovative company is enough, because that's more tangible, that's more real, and number is not important. So at Busan University, what is the area of interest these days? 3 years ago, many of our affiliates were interested in bio technology. So we used to talk about how listing one or two of our companies is important, and but I don't think there's an environment change. I always try to follow trends, but I'm not an avid trend follower myself. So biotechnology, even though people talk less about biotechnology, but we are sticking to the direction. And so we also talk about materials. And since our university is the biggest university in Busan. It's sort of a hub university, so we try to cover all sectors and all areas. But our current focus right now is material. So we are looking at Ulsan, and we talk about how we should form a driving engine centered on Busan, Ulsan, Gyeonggi province. So yes, biotechnology is still important for us, and new material is a current interest right now. So initial investment should always be followed by the next rounds of investment. Yes, right. I fully agree to your judgment about the direction. So we are here in Busan, and I feel a lot of positive energy drifting in the air. So I wish you all the good luck. So you have your experience, long years of experience in the tech holdings company. So what could be some ways, better ways forward? What should be an area for improvement? I think we should take a three-pronged approach. The first one is policy. What university for a long time was prohibited from building a for-profit entity, so it was an institutional barrier. So compared to private players, we do have some limitations, especially from institutional point of view. But as you mentioned, the new technology development depends on the affiliates model. That's why they build holdings company. So can we build holdings company for university? But there's also this regulational barrier where once you build a affiliate company, you can't build a holdings company for developing new technology. And you also have to consider the negative perception of the public. For example, if a private university wants to do a for-profit project, then people don't take it well or favorably. So I think the first point to start with is that you need to see high demands. So do all the universities have to have holdings company? Well, I don't think so. But I think we need to start having big demands in the first place in order to drive for the institutional or systemic improvement. So policy support should come together with the institutional or systematic improvement, and that's why we need to have demands first. And for many many public institutions, there's no demand, there's no high demand, and they don't have capabilities for high tech. So for and the only choice left for them is to build a holdings company, for example.
아니 자체적인 재원
And actually, over the long term, we are able to identify the possibility of long-term investment. So, at some degree, there might be issues related to quality, but with regards to demands in private sector and their awareness, and to improve their awareness, we need to secure some quantitative aspects. This will serve as a motivation. So building on some aspects, quantitative aspects, we need to provide tax exemption or incentives. In the early stage, holdings capabilities are subject to many curiosity and concerns. So holdings can form a investors union backed by regulations and system. And this is incorporated into the support as future scheme of policies. So quantitative aspects are well established, and after we need to manage qualitative aspects. So internal infrastructure should be fully utilized to compete with other private sector, or we can do cooperation with private sector to connect value chain, and also we need to increase the internal awareness on this with this respect. So on the supply side of universities, they are very obsessed with reaping outcomes. High risk, high return is something that we see in investment, but risky investment is not familiar to universities, and at the same time, long-term risk is not familiar to universities. But investment should be considered as a long-term objective. So the entities and players should increase their awareness so that they can cooperate with each other in an effective manner, and they need to expand the spectrum of work and tasks. And as for the perspective of institutional investors, when for 7 years, actually, we are able to calculate 5 years for companies going for public and co-stock market because they spent 12 years. So as a bridging role, private VCs can serve as a secondary fund for those technological holdings. And they need to establish a system of collaboration. This will lead to virtuous cycle. Then this will lead to a bold investment attraction. And this is where collaborative projects come into being. Thank you very much. But actually, we need to think about the practicality on the ground. Busan University and our holdings are supported by funding which is amounting to 100 billion won. But small-scale technology with less outcomes, what should they do? So what about the end for use perspective? What about your hands-on experiences? Is there any difficulty you have experienced? And not only end for you, but also for small-scale technology holdings, what would be the future direction? Could you please share with us with your 2 cents? And from the perspective of investors, if this forum is for that, then we would not be invited. But this is a session for public tech-based startup ecosystem. So as a helper and supporter, we are very small-scale technology holdings. To be honest, actually, let me clear about the sheer reality. 1.3 billion won of AUM. is what we have, but we only have 920 million won in cash. But we do exit and consulting profits and outsourcing profits, and we do have 8 alliance with the membership of 8 universities. So as Director Lee said, I spend a lot of time in academia, business, and university consortium. So we are at the forefront to identify the potential projects. So we do technology transfer help. We do help companies to technology transfer, and we do receive commissions during the process. And we try to diversify our revenue streams. And we are not affordable in respect to AUM, but going beyond that, we do our best to win orders so that those profits are equally distributed to our subsidiaries. It is not for earning our income, it is for helping subsidiaries. And the government-funded products are carried out, and this year 60% of our labor costs are offset. And 90% and 100% of our budget are operable within our capacity. And we do make an investment in subsidiaries establishment, and less than 100 million. We also have some Series A funding when our subsidiaries get Series A funding. So we try to be of great help to subsidiaries, but the reality is not that favorable. But as I mentioned before, we make most out of our existing infrastructure that we have, and as you're all aware of, Asia Universities is the one and only university with engineering college, hospital, medical school, and nursing school. So actually we have a great convergence. That's the reason behind we are able to win a project and order from MFDS. So in one single campus, everything necessary is set and prepared. This is our internal evaluation. So building on that, technology holdings are able to utilize the benefits of engineering college and technological conversion center. So we do receive a lot of support that we are able to serve as a technology holdings. But our funding is not that big, but we do have a garden variety of revenue streams to establish subsidiaries. As of last month, 51 subsidiaries were established, and this year 7 subsidiaries were established, and next month 2 will be added. So the regulatory science center are the same. Aju Hospital is carrying out open ward system. So actually there is an internal demand for startups, and many external companies reach out to us to utilize our internal infrastructure. 20 companies are reviewing starting their startups within our and for you technology holdings, and 2 to 3 months should be taken for feasibility test. So actually 20 is not that viable, but I do believe 10 to 12 will be enough. So up until next month, we try to build 9 to 10 out of 20. Then this means we will have more than 50 subsidiaries, and of which more than 50% of startups come from medical college and pharmacy college, and 1/4 of the subsidiaries are able to attract investment worth of 120 billion won. So at a maximum, a subsidiary receives 44 billion won in Series A to B in a cumulative manner. They prepare for going public. But and for you, utilizes good infrastructure that Edge University has, and outcomes spinning off Edge University are what we put much effort in it, and we try to help them to grow, to invest, attract a great investment. Thank you very much. And actually, your explanation is sufficient to understand what you are doing, and we are nearing the end. And team manager talked about a lot about and for you. So, what would be the requirements for public technological commercialization, and what would be the final comment?
교육부하고 했던 작업이
So what we do with the Ministry of Education, sorry to interrupt, one and a half minute. So last year we worked on guidelines for startup investment and startup projects. So there are a lot of requirements, administrative requirements, and regulatory requirements. So I really need to see more conducive environment for startup. And if you think about public institution investment, you tend to think that they are out of competition, but that's not true because a lot of us are competing for competency and capabilities. So I think, and of course, we need to be more active. Yes, thank you. Also, the same 1.5 minutes. Well, I'd like to talk about policy direction. So, for example, there are some things enjoyed by private venture capitals but are not enjoyed by public institutions, including the tax benefits and some capabilities when forming funds. So I think that's an area for improvement. And if that is improved, the holdings companies and public institutions will also enjoy some benefits. So policy support and tax benefits are what we need. Yes, thank you. Team leader, 30 seconds as a last comment. Yes, recently, one of the hot issues was digital healthcare and digital issues. I observed this during the Aji University project, startup projects. And well, he mentioned some difficulties of identifying between medicine and medical devices. So it's really it's a gray area in terms of regulation. So it's important to have a short-term approach. For example, the regulation sandbox and temporary deregulation. But I think more importantly, you have to come up with a guideline that's sustainable and that's for long-term orientation. Because no matter how good project, no matter how good technology you have, one error, one mistake in trying to get a license from the government, and the mistake will be irreversible. I'm gonna give you 2 minutes. Well, I'm gonna talk about something different. The government is burdened with too many tasks. And with the power change, with the administrative change, new programs are being born. So do we talk about you know what tips are, right? So there are too many different tips right now. But the thing is that some companies should go bust if they don't do well. And their failure can be a contribution to building a new startup. So if you fail, then you can start anew. So this policy support and policy direction and institutional improvement, that's all important. I understand it, but you can't fully rely upon the policy support. The government is shouldered with too many tasks. And if you look at the states, the case is different. So companies need to survive, need to prosper when they are doing their job well. So this death valley or how many years you survived, well, it doesn't really matter. And of course, you should be more open to the private investment money to come into the public players. So then what should be the direction for tech holdings company? Well, tech holdings company, aren't they private in nature? Well, some of them are public in nature, but I think private is the right direction. Well, yes, tech holdings company is a incorporation under the Commercial Act. Yes, I really appreciated all of your insights, and I asked myself a lot of questions listening to your answers. So I really appreciate your contribution. And personally, the public technology projects are a necessary building blocks in a startup's ecosystem. And the thing is that we need to think harder and work harder to equip those companies, equip those entities with more capabilities and more competitive edge. So all of you, it's upon the hands of all of yours. And I think this Fly Asia 2022 will grow into the real global conference as a hub platform in the Southeast and Northeast Asia. Thank you.
And with that, all the programs prepared for today's conference are finished. So please give them a big round of applause, our moderator and the panelists. Please give them a big round of applause once again. Thank you very much. Starting from 10:30 a.m. up until now, we have been rushed in listening to conference sessions, and we have been joined by many experts to listen to their insights and expertise. So I am curious about what 4 to 5 years after Busan look like. Now, let me conclude the second day of Fly Asia 2022, all the conference session prepared, and also a lot of programs await you on the third day of Fly Asia 2022. That concludes the conference session. I am Lee Misa, MC for today's conference. Thank you very much for your participation and staying at the very end.